What's going on, everybody? So today we're going to be tackling a project working on the wing windows in our Airstream. We have a 1976 Sovereign, so these kind of smaller style wing windows were in, I believe, like the late 60s through I think 82. After 82, they went up to the little bit bigger wraparound windows, and so I don't really know how those work, but for these, we're going to show you how to rebuild them. One of the problems that we had in ours was that there was a lot of condensation and there was leaking going on in it. You can see that there's actually water down here in the bottom where it's not sealed anymore. And additionally, you know, the gaskets are just old. It was probably leaking in general. So I've already rebuilt this one, and you can see that it's quite a bit better. It's got all new gaskets. It has new sealing all throughout it, and then the frame is all polished up. One of the other things that I did on this frame is you can see that this is now just smooth and polished, whereas this one has this ridge right here. So that is actually to connect this window to the center large window, and there's like a clamp thing that goes over the top of it, and that was about impossible to get apart. I actually had to break it to actually separate the windows, and so I was thinking, to be honest, especially looking at the back side of it, it doesn't really do a great job of sealing, and it's just, it doesn't look like a great design, to be honest. So I'm actually going to remove that on all the pieces and then put another piece of aluminum on the back side attaching to the body, and then I'm going to drill holes and rivet everything together so you kind of fix that weak link. So I cut off that piece, and then I ground it all down and fine sanded it and polished it. So I think it's going to look a lot better, and it's going to seal a lot better. Obviously you don't have to do that. If yours is in working order and it comes apart, go for it. But this is just an idea of what I'm doing to kind of improve upon and get a little bit better sealing on the front. So we're gonna move this one out of the way and start taking this window apart. Alright, so with these, they're actually pretty easy to get apart and to rebuild. There is 2 screws holding it together, and it's basically just this top piece comes off and then the window slides out. So I'm gonna get rid of some of the gunk and the sealant that they got going on covering the screws, just using a putty knife. In their attempt to seal some of the leaks, they used silicone, which you never want to use. And having to clean so much of this stuff off of the Airstream, that's been a huge pain in the butt. And you want to be really careful when removing the screws, especially they're original. You don't want to break one off in there, because it can get seized up. Sometimes whenever steel and aluminum mix, they seize together. So just want to go slow and don't force it. Speaking of, and that one was already broken. I didn't even hardly put any pressure on it, and the head just came off. so we got 3 of the 4 screws out. You want to keep these because they are, I don't know if you can replace them. I mean, you may be able to find them on some of the Airstream sites. I had one broken, so I'm going to have to be figuring that out. Always fun. So then once you get those out, then you can just kind of gently pry the windows apart, and this top piece should just slide right off with a little convincing. Still somewhat. See all the water dripping down inside of it. These little gaskets are just in horrible condition. There's that. Now getting this piece of glass out may prove to be a little tricky with how hard it was to get that piece off, but we'll see what happens. This one turned out to be a little bit more difficult than the first one I did. Usually how it goes whenever I pull out the video camera, what is normally relatively easy turns out to be a lot harder. But what I had to end up doing is use this oscillation cutting tool to basically just like cut the gasket out. It had been just leaking and honestly probably just been sitting in direct sun for so long that the gasket had become just incredibly hard and just it was really adhered to the window frame. So we got it loosened out, and so in theory, if yours isn't quite as in bad of shape as mine, it should pull out relatively easy, just like that, and then pull the remaining piece of gasket off of it, which is not a heck of a lot because I cut most of it up. And then you're left with the 2 panes, and then very similar to the other dual pane windows, I just use a box cutting knife to cut around the outside. Clean that off a bit. So sometimes it helps if you remove the foil tape. You don't necessarily have to. But then the next step, it's getting a little toasty. It's actually cold outside, but the sweatshirt is not working out great for me. So I just use it and cut around the edge, kind of peel some of that tape back. Once you get the two pieces apart, you're gonna just use, I use the kind of the box cutter to get a rough clean up on the outside edge, and then I'll use a razor blade and scrape the rest of it off, and then brake clean and some towels and maybe some like Scotch Brite pads. It's kind of a tongue twister. Some Scotch Brite pads to finish cleaning up the outside of the windows. So once we get those cleaned up, then we're gonna move on to putting them back together. On all the front windows for mine, the two wings and that big front one, I'm actually not gonna be tinting them. I'm gonna have the tinted rock guard in front of that, and so that'll give me the ability to have that up and open and have more light be able to come into the Airstream, and then lower that down if we get any direct sun or anything like that to kind of help with the heat and any bright light. So these I'm not going to tint, so we're just going to put them back together as is once they're cleaned up and polished. The panes of glass are now clean. We got all the buttle tape and all that stuff off. So for me, the next step is to polish the glass. Being original, it has taken a lot of abuse. It's got being on the front, it probably has some chips and some scratches from road debris and all that stuff, as well as just some sitting. It had some just etching from like sap and all that junk. So I got the Eastwood glass polishing kit. It comes with this this polishing powder that will mix with water, and then it'll polish the glass up real good. It also comes with this polishing, I guess, arbor, what are you gonna call it, the thingy that the pad attaches to. It just velcros on there, and then you attach it to a drill. So there's a link below for that. You can get it from Eastwood. We use a lot of their products. It's really awesome stuff, so go check that out. You basically just get about a spoonful of it, put it in a container to mix, just using some Tupperware. And you add water, and you want to get about the consistency of like toothpaste, maybe a little waterier, and then it's quite a bit waterier. From there, you just put some on, and then get this thing wet. And then I just kind of evenly spread it out on the glass before turning on the drill, otherwise I'm slinging all over the place. And then add a little more water. And then you just kind of in an even motion, just going back and forth in straight rows. As it does that. wipe it off, and it's good to go. So from here, I'm going to finish up polishing up both panes, and then we will go to putting the panes back together, putting the gasket in between it, and using the secondary sealant. We got the windows all cleaned up and polished now, so the next step is going to be to put them together. For this, I'm using gasket material from vintagetrailergaskets.com. There's a link below, and they have these awesome spacers for the dual pane gaskets. Originally, they just had bundle tape and then these little plastic spacer things with like silica gel desiccant in there. But through Vintage Trailer Gaskets, they have these new foam spacers that have like a foil backing on them that goes towards the outside, and then on the inside, in the foam spacer itself, it actually has a built-in desiccant to keep moisture out. So these are really fantastic. That's what I've been using on everything. So you want to, and they have dual-sided adhesive, so that really helps. So you want to put it around the outside of the window, leaving about, I believe it's a 3/16 of an inch. I've built a little wooden spacer thing that I just run around the outside of the window that spaces it properly. And with these wing windows, you're going to have obviously breaks in the spacer. The secondary sealant is going to help fill those gaps so that it doesn't leak through there. So that's not a big deal. And then there you have it with the spacer installed in between them. Alright, so now I'm going to just clean the glass again and then clean the other side to put down on it. And I am almost out of glass cleaner. The last thing you want is any smudges in between the two panes. It would just annoy you for the rest of your life. So, from there we're going to peel the adhesive off of the gaskets. Not peel the adhesive, peel the cover, whatever I said. So tricky. Alright, so it's now ready to go together. With the other dual pane windows, I had an alignment jig, but with this, I don't. It's pretty much impossible to build a jig for it because it's just how it's shaped and everything. So, if you're putting it together, you got to be really intentional, careful about how you're doing it. With this one, it doesn't overlap in the same way that it does on the other dual panes because they're roughly the same size, and so it all kind of squares up. So in that regard, it makes it a little bit easier. But you still need to be extremely careful when you're going about it so that you don't get it in the wrong place. So I like to kind of get a corner as lined up as I can. And then just kind of feel around the outside and pretty darn good. Perfect, but luckily these ones go together pretty easy, and there's not nearly the alignment issues there is on the larger dual panes, so that is all pretty good. It feels all pretty even, pretty close. Again, if it's not absolutely perfect, it's not going to be the end of the world. You just want it to all seal up, and it's like everything is sealed and together. So there is that, and that's kind of the most nerve-wracking part of this whole thing. Now the next step is going to be to put the secondary sealant, which is like a caulking, in that 3/16 gap that you have, and that's going to give it that final sealant. It's going to make sure that it's all, especially the spots where you had to kind of cut them and they're butted up against each other, that's going to make sure that that's nice and sealed. So again, this is another thing that I got from Vintage Trailer Gaskets. It is just, they call it their glass spacer secondary sealant, and this is designed for aluminum and stuff like that. I think it's a silicone base, but with using glass and stuff, that's fine. Normally on a trailer, that's like the 10 commandments of trailer carriers, never to use silicone, but this doesn't touch the aluminum, so it's not a big deal. And with that, they supply this little guide. Well, they supply it in exchange for money, but it's this little guide that basically has a little gap for that to fit in between, and it just goes on the front of the tube of caulking. So I'm just going to pull the old little plug out, and I like to use an electric caulking gun because it just makes the process so much easier. Okay. Alright, so we got the applicator on the tube, and then we just stick the little groove into the window slot, and when you start going, I'm using it at a pretty slow speed so I can have a lot of control over it. And now that it's all sealed up, we need to let it sit for about 24 hours to let that the caulking cure and be ready to have the gasket, the sash gasket put on. So in that time, I'm going to be finishing up polishing the frame for this one, as well as modifying that one piece to where it can be just riveted directly to a piece in there, which I'll show you everything I'm going to be doing when it comes to that kind of custom modification I'm doing. So we're going to let this cure, and then we're going to pick up tomorrow, or whenever I have time to continue this video.